Yo, what's up guys? Rust the Bro here, and today... Oh, God. No, sorry, I felt a surge of optimism and positivity. Gross. Let's just skip the intro and get into things. Any metagame is an evolving structure that will hedge outliers away from common use, and make more optimized setups far more common. Greatswords quickly fell outside of the standard meta in Elden Ring PvP due to the staggering damage ratio between what a greatsword can do versus other setups. But while its damage is low, a greatsword's strength comes in its inherent hyper armor and its ability to string together combos to vortex your opponent. But how good is it actually? In this video, I'll be going over the strengths and weaknesses of both Claymore's and the Knight's Greatsword, and how to optimize your use of the weapon. I had a lot of help in this video from ClayAmore, who took time to do some one-on-one coaching with me to help me get a better grasp on using the Claymore. And I highly recommend you go check out his Twitch, where he displays some of the highest skill with this weapon than out of anyone in the game. If you enjoy the video or find the information helpful at all, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to my channel for more content. There will be plenty more on the way. And be sure to leave a comment down below if the video is helpful to you at all or what I can do to improve in the future. Before the fight even starts, there's some important information that you need to consider. Greatswords have amazing combo potential, but it doesn't mean anything if you can't land a hit. Neutral is the space between you and your opponent that determines who gets priority on their attack, based on several factors like weapon range, poise, hyper armor, health advantage, and latency. To keep things concise, we're going to focus on the weapon itself. The standard R1 of the Knight's Greatsword effectively hits on the 17th frame, and the Claymore hits on the 16th frame. The Knight's Greatsword has 11 frames of recovery, and the Claymore has 12 frames of recovery. This frame data is important because it limits the weapon to being very prediction dependent. Your attacks are slow and reactable, and if the latency is high enough, you won't be able to punish on reaction. But improving your neutral with a greatsword isn't about what button you press to do damage. It's about your movement and your ability to read your opponent. Due to the slow speeds of the weapon, your best way to deal with neutral is to blend your attacks with your movement. With block canceling your pivots, micro spacing, crouch canceling, and empty jumps, optimizing your movement makes it much harder for your opponent to know when you're actually going for an attack, and it makes your odds of landing it much higher. It's these same type of movement principles that make the power stance great spears so terrifying. I'll probably do a whole video on movement at some point, but until I find another intro to steal, it might take a while. Knight's Greatsword and Claymore have a similar approach when closing neutral, but Claymore has a much easier time of it with its ability to disguise its thrust attacks between going for the crouch attack, R2, and the potential ashes, impaling thrust, and piercing fang, all of which have different roll timings and distances which force your opponent to carefully respond to what option you're going for. With both weapons, the easiest way to close neutral is with the 14-frame crouch attack, the 15-frame jump attack, or a hyper armor trade with a standing R1. But let's get a little technical. This is supposed to be helpful, right? Not just an infomercial. Your bread and butter will always be the jump attack. In one of my previous videos, I went over the various types of jump attacks, and it's important that you're using all of those when using a greatsword. Reverse jumps, empty jumps, delayed jump attacks are all mix-ups to your timings and force your opponent to make a precise read in order to avoid getting hit. Going for the same thing over and over again will get you punished every time, so mix-ups are necessary to win. With the long recovery of your attacks, you can speed it up a bit with your rope bombs, which allow you to get back to a sprint a whole 10 frames earlier than being able to run. If your opponent is playing very passively and they react well to all of your attacks, you can mix things up with rope grease, which has a very similar animation to your running R2. If they roll the grease, they're likely to get caught by the R2. You can crouch cancel to recover your attacks by a frame or two, but you can also use crouch canceling to blend between a running R1 and a crouching R1. A hyper armor trade is the use of the innate hyper armor that you get on the standard moveset of the greatsword, ensuring that you don't stagger against some attacks. You still take the full amount of damage that you're trading with, but if you successfully trade, you'll gain attack priority and force the opponent to play defensively. There's a set amount of hyper armor given on the base amount of poise that you're using, boosted by the Bullgoat Talisman. For an easy way to calculate how much poise you need to trade with different weapon classes, I have a hyper armor calculator available in the description. This was made by Amir, and is publicly available in the PvP Discord. But one important thing to note is that the JR1, backstep attacks, and rolling attacks provide less hyper armor than other types of attacks. Combos have an interesting property where if you hit an opponent that's already on hit stun, it reduces the hit stun of the next attack. This is an intentional mechanic that is meant to keep people from being stun locked from full health. So all of these true combos are only applicable given that the opponent wasn't in hit stun prior to the setup of the combo. After a substantial amount of testing and exploring the frame data, I can comfortably speak to the reliability of the true combos on both the ClayAmore and the Knight's Greatsword. ClayAmore has a very unique true combo that Clay showed me, however it's rather unreliable due to the precise angling required to execute. The Knight's Greatsword on the other hand is a true combo machine, with several true combos available to it that I have tested extensively and verified their reliability. Most attacks from the Greatsword do a damage level 2 stun, which lasts for 24 frames and is able to be rolled on the 25th frame. Hitting with the last frame of the JR1 will combo into the first frame of the R1-2. This requires free aiming your jump attack to the right of the opponent so that the last frame of your jump attack connects on hit. This true combo is inconsistent. It does not work every time. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. There doesn't seem to be a clear reason of why it is inconsistent, but it is. With proper setup and execution, it still has a chance to not land. Hitting with the last frame of the R1-2 will combo into the first frame of the R1-3. This requires framing the R1-3 to the left so that you hit with the first frame of that attack. A fully charged R2 combos into an R1. The crouch attack combos into a fan dagger, which gives you a headshot if your opponent is facing you. It's not actually a true combo, but the headshot staggers even through a dodge. This one is also inconsistent, and you're generally better off using other options. There's two things that make the true combo less reliable. Both of those things are latency. The true combos are very precise in which frame you have to hit with them, and in many cases, latency can affect which part of the hitbox you're actually striking with. So we tested in a controlled environment where my opponent stood still while I lined up the combos with a precise frame. There's a concept called hit confirm, where you might wait for the damage to register on your opponent before going for your follow-up. You cannot hit confirm these true combos. Even one frame of delay will mean that the combo doesn't land. If you go for the follow-up and they were able to roll out, they'll have plenty of time to punish your attack. The other way that latency might affect this is that the opponent might have run very clearly out of range for you to do the follow-up on your attack. You'll no longer be in range to do the true combo. For these reasons, the Greatsword functions very poorly on high latency, even though the combo is still technically true. Once you've closed neutral and landed a hit to gain your advantage state, you have many options to keep priority. The variety of ways to roll catch, mix up your timings, and maintain pressure is really what makes this weapon work as well as it does, but all of them scale poorly with high latency. If the latency is bad enough, someone can literally double roll out of anything you do to avoid getting vortexed. I'm going to quickly go over a few ways to roll catch a panic roll after a regular R1. R1 into R1. Holding forward until the first frame that you start to move lets you roll catch straight into a second R1. R1 to JR1. This is the safest roll catch and helps against people that like to mash out of hit stun. R1 to CR1. Crouch canceling into CR1 lets you roll catch and sets you up for a fan dagger headshot to continue the vortex. R1 into Piercing Fang. This Dash of War only roll catches if the opponent rolls away or to the side. If they roll into you, then they avoid the attack, but the innate moveset of the Greatsword discourages people from rolling in. R1 into Flaming Strike, possibly plus follow-up. This is one of the more damaging combos, but it is best used against people with less than 100 poise to guarantee the follow-up Flaming Strike hit. Reverse Backstep. This is best on higher latency when someone receives a late hit and they are clearly outside of your normal range. A Reverse Backstep can let you close that gap very well. I don't recommend using the reverse backstep too much, as it's susceptible to a neutral jump or even mashing out of hit stun, but it's still a good tool for mix-ups and I use it way more often than I should. R1 into R2. This is far more reliable on a ClayAmore, but on KGS it works as well, you just have to corner pressure, and it doesn't work if the opponent rolls directly away from you. The most important thing when maintaining a vortex is knowing how and when to mix up your timings to maintain pressure. Identify when your opponent is less prone to panic rolling and throw out different mix-ups to confuse their timings. So you decided to be a Greatsword main, and your opponent has Light Roll, or just runs away and spams spells at you. Good luck. You're gonna need it. Really though, you're not winning in this situation. If you're dead set on using only a Greatsword, you can try some ranged ashes like Stormblade or Beast Roar to try and force them to engage, but at the end of the day, if someone decides to go full passive, there's pretty much nothing you can do about it. Everything has its strong points and its weak points in its moveset. Closing neutral and Chasedowns are the weak points of the Greatsword. The best Ashes of War for a greatsword are the ones that allow you to either cover the weak points of the weapon or continue a combo chain. Storm Stomp. This is a stable Ash of War, but generally only really useful on opponents with under 100 poise, so it's not really worth it. If your opponent walks into your stomp, you can land an R1, but if they get hit while rolling out of it, you can land an R2. Flaming Strike. This Ash is great for corner pressure or in situations where your opponent is in the habit of rolling toward you to avoid Piercing Fang. Piercing Fang and Impaling Thrust. These work great with both greatswords, and ClayAmore can blend these ashes very well into its normal moveset to mix up the attack timings. Stormblade, Beast Roar, and Hoarfrost Stomp. When you need to get some ranged pressure, these are great options to go for. Hoarfrost Stomp and Beast Roar share similar animations to Storm Stomp, and swapping between these ashes during a fight can be very effective. You can realistically use greatswords on whatever build type you want, depending on what weapon swaps you want available or access to different spells. I personally run a strength build specifically because the higher strength gives a bit of physical resistance, which allows me to hyper armor trade a little easier. When you're considering a build, you want to be thinking about what your swaps provide in terms of utility that your main weapon doesn't meet. I tend to run enough dexterity to use heavy thrusting sword so that I can have an option for Chasedown if I encounter someone who's playing super passively. Other than that, 60 vigor no matter what the build. I'd always recommend over 91 poise to give you the hyper armor you need to tank a one-handed halberd, so enough endurance to wield the weapon, armors, and talismans for that, and everything else into your main damage stat. For talismans, there's a few different ways that you can run your build, but Bullgoat Talisman is a must so that you can make use of your hyper armor, and Claw Talisman to increase the damage of your jump attacks. At the end of the day, the greatsword is a pretty middling weapon. It isn't strong enough to be meta specifically because it performs poorly in neutral. Something like a single great spear or halberd does everything a greatsword can do except better. But part of the appeal in using a greatsword is the fact that it isn't the best, that it has a very high skill floor, and even at the highest skill ceiling, it just doesn't have the tools it needs to be meta. But that shouldn't stop you from trying to have fun and make it work. I love this weapon, and I never leave Grace without at least 8 of them in my pocket. I hope this video was helpful to some of you and maybe gave you some insight on what you can do to improve your use of the weapon. A special thanks to Shell, Tug, Walt Dixon, and ClayAmore. I really appreciate the work that everyone put in this video to help me out, and I'll see you all another time.